Alright, so first we need to remove this O-ring. Remove this dry shaft flange. Next we're going to remove the oil pan. Pry up on this connector, pull it out. Pry up on this. Next, remove these smaller T40s. Lift up on this tab and then pry in the connector. Next, to remove the valve body, you're basically going to remove all the bigger T40 bolts. Gently pry up over here, and the valve body will just pull straight out. That's it for the valve body. Next we're going to remove the pump assembly. Pry in here, that'll break the seal on the O-ring. Just gently grab this, try to guide it out straight. assembly will just pull straight out. Rid of this B clutch. The cases on these can break pretty easily. That's what the special tools we included is for. Slide that over. A small screwdriver. Snap ring off. This assembly will pull out. Pull your shaft out. Slide right out. Next, we're going to use a smaller ring. Slide that over there. Get this out. The snap ring. There's going to be 2 more snap rings inside of here. These clutches will just pull right out. These are the C&E clutches. These like to fall off, so just pull those out, set them aside. That's for that. Next is D clutch will pull out. I like to set this in here. It's a little easier for disassembly. Just grab this snap ring here, pull that out, just flip it over, that'll slide right out. That's about it for the main teardown. Next we'll tear down the C&E clutches, put those together, check the clearances. We'll build a D clutch, check the clearances, and then we can put all that back together. Then we'll do the A clutch, and then start on our final assembly.
Okay, part 2. This is going to be assembly. Now what we recommend is, this is just for demonstration purposes. This transmission is not getting built. This is a core unit. Typically what we'll do is clean everything so it's completely spotless before assembly. But again, for demonstration purposes, to make sure you understand how to install the clutches, we are not going to do that on this one. We're leaving everything as it is, so you can see how it all goes together. Okay, go ahead.
So we're going to take these 2 clutches,
Okay, so we have the C clutch set up on our bench here. You can also use a press for this. So basically the bottom is, the hub is held in place on a solid surface. And what we're gonna do is the shaft is gonna pull this assembly down and push down on the piston here to release this clip so we can access the plates. Again, this can be done on a press. We just built this. It's a shaft that comes through the bench that makes it a little bit easier.
So in the C clutch, pull this out. Likes to get a lot of clutch material in here, so clean that out real well. Make sure you lube your seals back up before you put that back together. Slide your clutches on. The C clutch, this will remove. Just pop that back in there.
Again, if you clean all this, which you should, it's a good idea to clean it because clutch material gets into everything, all the little crevices. If you clean it, make sure you re-lubricate all those O-ring seals in the shaft, any seal, any surface that the seal mates with, make sure that it's lubricated as well. Just regular ATF would be fine. Just something to keep the seal happy.
Once that's done, we can just start reassembly.
So the clutch should be pre-packaged like this. Again, we're putting the OEM back in, but yours will be different. It'll have more plates. Pre-packaged as it is, this is how you install it. Remember, it's always friction steel, friction steel, friction steel, and steel on each end. There's typically a thicker steel on each. If you find a thicker steel, it's going to be on the top. But again, we already have it pre-stacked for you, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Just install it as it's stacked in the kit. Again, this piston on the top, the seal on the inside, which goes around over here, it must be clean because the clearances are going to change slightly from factory with the new plates. So if there's any material on there, it's very coarse, and it could affect the seal performance, and it could cause pressure issues with the transmission. So it's very important to make sure all of that's clean and lubricated properly. Again, we're not cleaning this due to demonstration purposes. All right, go ahead.
That's it for the C clutch. This one here with the splines down here, this is the E clutch. It's going to be basically the same deal as the C clutch. This C clip, since it's round, can be a little tricky. If you just spread it and get under here with the flat head, I'm going to pop it right out. Pop that off. Again, pull that apart. Clean inside of there. See a lot of clutch material in there. So get that cleaned out. Lube your seal up. Put that back together.
What's very important, if you run this through a washer, it will look clean, but it will fool the eye. Take your finger and go across there. If you feel any rough areas on the surface, there's still material. I would go through with your finger, make sure you get it all out. It's very important. So which one's this one again?
This is the E clutch.
Okay, so this is E. So the E clutch pack would go on like this. Again, this is just factory for demonstration purposes. Yours will have more plates. Again, it's steel friction, steel friction, steel friction, steel on each end, just like the last one.
The clutch pack that we sent, it won't have this thinner steel washer in there. Don't worry about that, just leave that out. Alright, that's it for the C&Es. We'll go check our clearances, make sure we're good there, and then move on to the D and A clutch and start the final assembly. Alright, so for the C&Es, we're going to flip them over. We're going to check these clearances with a feeler gauge. Again, this is just factory, so this isn't going to be accurate for your application, but we're going to use feeler gauges. And just slide it in between the steel plate and the hub. We're shooting for 45 to 65 thousandths.
Which one's that?
This one's the E, this one's the C.
So 45 to 65 on
both of these.
On both, okay.
So just check it with a feeler gauge, make sure you push down, and then just slide your feeler gauges in there. Figure out where you're at for clearance wise. As long as you're between 45 and 65, you'll be good to go on those.
Okay, and it's the same with that one right there?
Yeah, same with the C.
Okay.
So we'll set those aside. We'll move on to this.
Now, if it's wrong, if it's too tight, you obviously need to put a thinner steel in here where there's the thick one. If it's too loose, you'll have to go with a thicker steel. So just keep that in mind. If you shouldn't need to do that, we should have it set up so it'll be perfect as it is. But it's good to check that anyway. And if you do have a problem and you need a different steel, please let us know.
Alright, so now we're going to do this D clutch. Same thing with the D, you're not going to have this thinner wave washer in here.
Yeah, that's factory. That'll be removed. Don't put the thin plate back on. And that's on any of them. They'll have a thin plate on top of the thicker plate. Do not reuse those. Just throw them away. Use only what is supplied in the kit. The stack as you see it, put it in there. Don't add anything to it. Okay.
We'll start with the steel first. Lay a friction in there. Steel friction. Same on this D clutch, you won't reuse this thicker steel. This is just factory. So once you have your stack in there, go ahead and put your C-clip in there.
Okay, again, so the new steel you're going to have here will not have these these dimples on it, right? It's going to be a solid piece. So again, install what we give you. Do not reinstall this. This is no longer used. Okay.
So on this, just try to get your gap in the middle. The middle there. And then we're going to use a caliper. Make sure it's flat on here. And that's contacting the steel. We're going to push down very firmly, but it's easy to get off center here and then it'll change your reading. So just keep it nice and flat, push down firmly, and then zero it. And then come in here to your second steel and just lift up. So this one's reading 75. This is obviously a used clutch pack, so it's reading a little high, but again on this one we're going for 45 to 65 thousandths.
Okay. So 45 to 65 on this one. Okay. So basically you put the tool in here. Yep. Okay, so you have it on the clip, right? And then it's pushing on the plate.
On the basket.
Oh, okay.
Pushing on the
So you
plate.
push. So you have the tool on the basket, and then this piece that's adjustable is touching the plate. So you push down, zero it out, and then you use a screwdriver. As you can see how it lifts up, that's the clearance. So you zero it out, lift it up, and see what the clearance says. So that's what we're looking for, is that clearance. Okay.
That's about it for the D clutch. After that, we can start reassembling the C and E's. Take this basket after it's cleaned up. We're gonna start with the C pack, the snout going down. Basically, just line up your first friction, and then just kind of rotate it until they all line up. Slide that down in there. There is a bearing down in here. Make sure that's in there. Sometimes it falls out. I'd pull it out before you wash it. So make sure that bearing's in there. Next, make sure you got your bearing in there. Grab your C clutch. Splines are going to go upward. Same deal. And then put your last bearing on top. Next, we're going to put the lower clip in on the lower groove. Put your next clip in. That's it for the C and E's in that basket. Next, we're gonna slide this back into this case. It's got these dimples in here. Just make sure that your first one is in there. So for this, you can tell it's not quite in that groove. If you just get a pry bar or a screwdriver, rest it on that edge. And just give it a little smack with a hammer. Should pop right in. That's fully seated there. Now you got your C and E's, the D clutch built. We're going to take this whole assembly here, and this is what splines with the frictions on the D. So I'm just going to slide this in here. Rotate it until it starts splining in there. That's it for that. We're going to take this case, slide this whole assembly back into here. This, just kind of wiggle it, spin it. It should start to spline on that outer sun gear.
Okay, so it essentially, when it's just protruding just a little bit, is where it's perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's it for that. Next, you're going to take this piece in here. Make sure your bearing is in here still. that's it for that one. So on this main shaft, these are all the seals for the clutches. Just verify that there's no scratches, tears, anything major on those. There's a couple back here as well. We're just gonna carefully slide this in here. That's it for that. So this one's a little tricky. You could try to do it on the table. What I like to do is rest it on the edge of the bench, right on this outer surface here.
So I assume, since it's the last clip on that entire assembly, that if this clip does not fit, that means something is wrong somewhere, right?
Yeah.
If it's all in correctly, the clip should fit nice and snug.
So for this clip, you'll see this notch over here and this little part on the steel there.
Okay.
You're gonna align that notch with that dimple there. Same thing over here. It's not quite in, so just take a screwdriver or pry bar, just give it a little smack. That's how it should look. So that's it for the main assembly. The C&E clutches, the D at the back. Next, we're going to do the A clutch and then start our final assembly.
Do you want me to stop?
Yeah.
This is the A clutch?
Yep, this is the A clutch. Just go ahead and start the big C clip. Pop that out. And just lift up on this. Sometimes this bottom steel will fall out. The only thing that's keeping these in is the these little notches actually hold the frictions. So go ahead and pull that out. You can use some brake clean in this. Don't put this whole unit in the wash because it has the oil pump.
Yeah, that's the oil pump.
So to start with, go ahead and put the hub back on there. In the kit, you're gonna have all of these included, but you need to take your factory thin wave washer and put that in there and use the second one that we included.
So the wave washer, is it, it's just, okay. So this basically is just the steel that's on top of the steel. So you'll know it's the right one. If you look at it, you can see the witness marks on here from the piston making contact with it. And you can see nothing else. There's no friction material wear marks on it. So it's, you have to reuse this piece on this clutch.
So yeah, you'll take your factory one as well as the one that we included. This wider notch will line up with the wider notch on the case. So put that in there, put your second one in there, and then just start with the steel.
So the bottom will have two steels, the shim, the wave spring shim that we just showed, and then the steel that we include in the kit goes on top of that. And then you have steel friction all the way up. So is there two on the top on this one too?
No, just the one.
Okay. So two steels on the bottom, and then on the top, you just use the steel we include on the top. It's only one steel.
And just go ahead and put your C-clip back in there. So just like the D clutch, try to get this center of the notch there.
Oh yeah, so we're gonna check clearances like the D clutch. Okay.
Yeah. And then I just tip this over. Again, keep this nice and flat. Push down firmly. Zero that out. And then lift up on the steel. And that's going to tell you your clearance. So once again, this one's 71. Same thing as all the other clutches. We're shooting for 45 to 65.
All right.
That's about it for that.
So you can definitely see the wear on this transmission. So everything's out of spec. It's supposed to be 45 to 65. 65 maximum. And they're in the 70s. So there you go. Okay. So that was A. Okay, now for final assembly into the case. The kit includes a new seal. Again, for demonstration purposes, we're not pulling this seal out. But you want to be careful not to lose this shim, and make sure that it's centered in here, because when you try to put the assembly together and the shaft comes through, it could get jammed on this. So if you already have the seal out, then you could put the washer on later when you put the seal back on. But just don't forget about this washer.
So if your seal is in there, I'll just put a little bit of grease up here, just kind of hold it in place.
Yeah, again, you don't have to do this if you're going to leave, if you're replacing the seal, because you'll have access to the shim. You can pull it out. So.
Alright, so this piece over and start a reassembly. That's it for that. You'll know it's all the way in here. This parking claw, you can see the gear down in there. Once it's under this lever, that's fully seated in the case.
Okay.
If you want to be able to turn it, this will get locked if you just push down on this a little bit, pull this back. I normally just slide a piece of metal in between there, and that'll just hold that back so the parking claw isn't engaged. This can still spin.
Okay, so when you remove that and all this moves back, the parking pawl here will clamp down and engage, and then you cannot turn it. So right now you have it so you can turn it for easier installation.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to the B clutch. There's no replacements for these. The clutches are so big, we never see any wear on these. So you're basically just going to clean these up and then just reassemble. Go ahead and take your hub. Make sure that's fully seated. And for these, you're going to start with your thickest steel first. lift up on the clutch pack assembly a little bit. And just start stacking friction and steel with the wave.
So the wave goes in with the friction?
Yeah, it goes around the friction, yeah.
And then the end on this one takes 2 steels?
No, just one.
Oh.
Just one on this.
Well, it looks like you got a steel there and then another.
Oh yeah, the thick steel and then your
Okay,
thin
so the
wave
thin one
washer.
goes on top. Okay.
Yeah, the very last. That's about it. Just make sure that everything's seated firmly.
And you'll know it's right by looking at the splines. So you can see it should be in just a little bit, the last steel. If it's sticking out past those splines, then something's wrong.
Okay, next you're gonna take your this big spring. It's got these 2 notches in it. You'll see these on the case, the smaller one and the bigger one there. So just line those up. The notches go in first. That's it for that. Your kit will have a new O-ring for this. Just make sure it's lubed up really well. That's gonna seal on the case here. So I normally put a little bit of lube here and then put some on this surface of the case. Make sure it's lubricated very well. After that, we're just gonna put this back in there and get it bolted up. These things can be a little bit of a pain sometimes. I don't really have an exact method for it. Basically just lifting up on the clutch assembly and spinning this back and forth until it splines. Once you get it in that far, it's starting on the O-ring. I'll just take the handle of the hammer, just give it a couple small hits, and it should go ahead and knock right in. Got a little bit of a gap there, is fine. That's just on the spring. So once you get it that far, just go ahead and take your pump housing bolts. We'll start putting these back in. Kit will also have new ones of these. Again, it's just factory. But
yes, it's very important to replace those because they will leak. So make sure you replace all of those as well.
want me to do 2 opposite? That's about it for that. Once you have your pump back in there, don't forget your O-ring on here. If you don't have this O-ring in there, it will not seal in the torque converter and the trans won't work. Just make sure that's in its groove. That's about it for that.
Yeah, remember on removal, you had to remove that to get everything to slide out, so it's very important to get it back in.
Okay. After that, we're gonna go ahead and put the valve body back in there.
Do you have to disengage the parking pole?
No, leave this in there. If this is forward, the valve body won't want to go in. So leave your.
Oh, okay. So that needs to be, everything needs to be moved. So yeah, so pulling on that lever back like that, the valve body will not go on unless you do that. Okay, go ahead.
So for this, the only thing is this speed sensor here. It likes to get caught up. It's going to go right inside of that little groove right there. So you're putting this in. Make sure that's ready. Align there. Also, when you pull these out, sometimes these will stay in the pump. So make sure you remove those and keep it on the valve body. Other than that, just put this back in. So in this here, this is what actuates the parking paw. So make sure that's aligned there.
Oh, okay, I see. So a piece like this is sticking out, and it has to go inside this piston here. Okay, in that groove for the parking pole. So yeah, if you didn't have this plate in there, this would be over where you couldn't do that, right?
Yeah, the valve body will hit
Okay.
that, so one more of the valve body to go in there.
And there's a hole back there for the speed sensor. Well, I guess that's it, right? Just all the bolts back in. And
All the bolts, yeah, just get all the T40 bolts back in. Slide your connector in. It's only going to go one way. It has that notch. That's going to go towards this side of the trans. It'll only go in one way. Once it's fully seated in there, push this down, put all your bolts back in, put your oil accumulator back in, put your flange on there. This seal has to go in between this shaft on this surface and here. So it's got 2 lips. You have to make sure that it's fully seated in there before you tighten the nut. Once the nut's on there, go ahead and restake it. Put your pan back on it and put it back in.
Oh, which way? Okay, so the seal goes, so once you have this on the shaft, the seal, so the hollow end of the seal faces in or out? In, okay. So once you have it inside, you're gonna put this seal goes between the shaft and this housing to prevent leaks. So it has to go on that way. Okay. Okay.
That's about it.
That's it? Okay.
Okay, so we're just going to show you how to get the seal in there correctly. Go ahead and slide your flange on. Again, the hollow side of the seal is going to go in. You just get one end in and walk it around. horrible. Let's redo that.
I mean, yeah, that's what makes it difficult. So. It's very important that the seal is in there because it prevents leaks. It'll leak past the nut if it's not in there. Yeah, that's good. All right. And then you install the nut. And then once the nut is all the way in and tight, you just take a punch and you punch it and wherever it needs to be staked, wherever the notch is on the shaft. Okay, is that it?
Okay, so for this connector, once again, it has this notch in here. You'll know it's fully seated when this lip is almost up against the case, so keep firm pressure on that, and then just push down on this tab until it locks in.
So that tab is what holds that connector in. Okay. So yeah, you have to push that tab is basically a locking tab for that connector. So you have to make sure that that's down when you have the connector in and you want it to stay in, and you have to pull that up like that to pull the connector out. So up to take it out, down when you have it in and you want to lock it in. All right. Okay.